Says it's not streaming yet, but we will get it going.
But it is
Yeah,
recording.
it's recording. Hey, we're
There we go.
streaming.
Hey, all
There we
right. Very good.
go.
You're on,
We
Chris.
are live. Sweet. Welcome, everybody, to the True Leadership Show, where we love getting through technology and making things happen and work. And where we really love and what we're really passionate about, though, is not just fulfilling a call as leaders to just be a leader, but fulfilling a call to raise up other leaders. But the thing is, you got to be true to yourself. To be a true leader to other people, you got to be true to yourself. And so, as we continue on in this series of Leaders Are, and I'm going to say this hopefully every week because I like to qualify this statement with the fact that it's the understanding that these are traits and abilities, these are characteristics, these are even personalities that can all be blended together one way or another. It doesn't mean you're perfect at it. Now, there are some where it's just like, that's just something you got to have. You just got to have it. You may not be the absolute best at it, but you got to have it. There's others where, you know what, there's balances, there's adjustments, there's pivots that are made, things like that. Just like working with my co-host here, Mike Van Pelt, and Jim T. Chong, the walk star. We have balances that help one another out and they give each other different strengths. So that's what we're talking about. And today, this is one of those that I believe, and I actually am going to ask you guys to correct me if you think I'm wrong in saying this, or give me your opinion on it. We'll start with Mike when I say it. Today's topic, I believe, is one, something that is becoming more and more prevalent. But more importantly, I think it needs to. I think it needs to. And today's topic is leaders are vulnerable. Now, when I say vulnerable, and I know a lot of men get dialed in on this, and I know there's some ladies who can do it too, so we're going to keep it equal here. But there's a lot that say, well, if you're vulnerable, you're weak. And I disagree with that. And I think it's something we need to have more of. So, Mike, what are your thoughts on that? And do you agree or disagree with me?
No, I agree. I think that this word gets masqueraded sometimes it's something it's not because, I commonly use vulnerability with the word authenticity, because if you are being vulnerable, you're being authentic. And if that means, you're a dude and you got tears running down your cheek, so be it. That doesn't mean you're any less of a man. And I think it's very important to be vulnerable because you when you're not vulnerable, it's as if you're trying to mask something. Like, I'm gonna let you in, but it's not far enough because I don't want you to touch that spot, or I don't want you to know what's really going on. And so I think being vulnerable is really, really important. I think people are starved for that because they want people that are real and authentic. And we all have emotions. We all have emotions, and we can't run from the fact that we do. And I don't think we should run from the fact that we do. And there's plenty of people that do, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I 100%. I think we should be vulnerable.
And I want to add a special note here for those of you that tuned in last week. And if you haven't, you should. What was our topic last week? Authenticity. See how this works?
Yeah.
It does all combine together. It all does balance one another out. And Mike even brought up, and he brought it up last week too, about taking that mask off. You've got to be able to do that now. And Jim, this is a question I want to ask you,
Chris.
and you can
can I add, Chris?
Of course.
No, listen, it's weighty to run around and be carrying baggage around. Right?
It is. And that's the thing is, and if you're doing that, here's the thing. One way or another, it's a proven fact, your vulnerabilities are going to come out. And, especially when we speak to the sadness or the tears. And when I say that, even tears don't have to be sadness. There can be tears of joy too.
Oh yeah.
And there are those that will hide that. And there'll be people like, aren't you excited about that? Yeah, I'm excited. Right? Wrong. Okay. It doesn't just have to be this crying, depressed, anxiety ridden state. It could be excitement too. It's okay to show that range. But the thing is, no matter what, vulnerabilities are going to show. The question is, which way do you want them to show? And my point to that is if you are constantly carrying that weight around, more than likely it's going to show up in anger. And you're going to take it out on people in the wrong ways. And you're going to lose that authenticity. You're going to lose that respect. You could lose the title or position. I've seen that happen
Mm-hmm.
where, and they were like, man, what was going on with him? We've talked about this in this show and with this group of being able to have those conversations with the right people and at the right times, so you don't have that just explosion of emotion, because it turns into a cascading effect. And especially as a leader, that can have a profound negative impact on everybody. And now you've got other people doing it too. And many times, unfortunately, this is trained. It's trained. There'll be somebody, they'll be kind of talking, yeah, I was discussing this with all my employees and my team, and we got to talking about it. And, and you'll have this boss who had this masquerade and, oh, you can't talk to them like that. Don't do that. You're in charge. You make sure they know that whatever you say goes, and they can't be wasting time on that. We ain't got time for this emotional junk. I actually heard that one time. And then the next thing you know, we became this. I was actually a part of this team. This was a long time ago. I was actually a part of this team, and we became this melting pot. And it took a couple of us as leaders, myself and a couple others, where we sat back and said, this doesn't feel right, and we're not getting anything done. And now we're getting yelled at for not getting it done. So we had our own meeting. We had our own, said, hey guys, what do you think about this? How do we fix this? It's like, I don't feel like my true self. No pun intended that this is true leadership. I don't feel like my true self. It's like, okay, let's fix that. Forget those two, quite honestly, because obviously they have their own thing going on, and let's get this done. And we rocked it. And after that, they were like, well, what changed? It's like, we became our true selves with each other. The one guy who was originally vulnerable with us came back and started apologizing. And so, Jim, I'd love to collect some of your thoughts on some of these statements and things of just understanding that vulnerability, it doesn't have to become this explosion of things. It could just be being authentic and being honest with one another. Oh, Jim, you're muted.
Yeah, vulnerability, that's an interesting word. And, in terms of vulnerability, I think, just being honest. Some people relate vulnerability with crying and all that. It doesn't have to be. It could just be being honest, just really being able to be truthful in what you're sharing. And sometimes vulnerability, just by its definition, is all about just exposing yourself to, potential criticism or just who you really are. And it could be viewed as a sign of weakness, but I agree with you. I think it's, with where you're going with this, I think it's really important that we are vulnerable. We are real. I mean, that kind of ties directly in with being authentic. And so I think it's such an important word for us to really grasp and really define it, and I don't know how, you define it as a true man, right? What is vulnerability as a true man? I think it's just being open and just honest. It doesn't have to be where you're crying or anything. It just means that you are just open, honest, and, expose yourself. You say, this is who I am.
Yeah, and something you said there, Jim, I want to key in on for a second here, that was going to come up a little bit later in this was, like you said, and I said it, Mike agrees with us, that vulnerability doesn't have to be crying and all these things, but you brought up honesty. There are a lot of people that they get afraid of criticism, or they're even taught. I actually had someone try and teach me this. It was a manager one time try to teach me, hey, listen, don't tell them you've messed this up. Don't tell them you've screwed up, because they're going to see that, and you said it, they're going to see this as a sign of weakness that you messed up. I looked at him, I said, no, I'm going to tell them I screwed up, because one, I want to apologize, and two, I want to be fully authentic with them, because that's too vulnerable. You're going to make yourself weak in front of them. And I looked at it, I said, listen, man, you can fire me for saying this. That's a load of crap. I said, I'm going to go be truthful with everybody, and I guarantee you I gain more respect. I got written up for it. I didn't care. And I went and told everybody, and the next thing you know, I was getting more interaction than he was, and he, of course, became jealous, and we had to have a talk about that. But coming kind of full circle from where you were, Jim, is vulnerability is not just this tying of emotions as much as it is. It's just full honesty and integrity. Having the integrity to say, this is who I am. But Mike, something I'd love to get your thoughts on, and Jim made mention of True Man. Mike is the host of the True Man podcast and True Man Life Coaching. So I have a feeling this probably gets brought up quite a bit in one fashion or another. It doesn't have to be the specific word, but as a leader, whether it be at home with your kids, your spouse, or in the church or in an organization, workplace, is there such thing, and how do we balance it, as too much vulnerability, too much honesty, too much releasing and expressing of emotion?
What is too much?
That's the question.
Yeah. What is too much? Well, I'll answer that this way. So on my podcast, the True Man Podcast, I like to think that I'm vulnerable. In my writings, I'm vulnerable. I was working on some things this weekend, and I was essentially working on the story of when I was in first grade and I got glasses. And so, what was the trickle down effect of me getting glasses, and how did that show up in my life? Now, that's being vulnerable. Now, too much on the True Man Podcast would be me having conversations about intimacy with my wife. Now, that would be a little over the top, and she would not be happy, and that would be ridiculous. So, I mean, I don't know how else to look at it, because here's the other side to that coin. So that would be too much. What I think happens more times than not is that people are vulnerable up until a point where it touches something that they don't want to touch on. And, or it really hits a nerve for them and they're not prepared to talk about it. Maybe with you, maybe they're talking about it with somebody else. I don't know. But can there be too much? I think it depends on the situation, but I think that it's important to be honest as much as you can, because earlier I said something about being weighty. I mean, you don't want to walk around in life carrying a boat anchor. And that's what a lot of people do. We talk about what is a true man? What is a true man? Think about vulnerability. Well, I'll tell you. Jesus was humble and vulnerable as he died on the cross. That's pretty authentic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And they talk about it, I believe, in the book of Matthew. So, it's just important to be real. When you're a fake and a fraud, you may live with that for a short period of time. It always shows up one way or another. One way or another, it shows up. And sometimes it shows up in ways you may not like.
Oh, been there, done that. And I think the key word to this is discernment.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that when we think of the opposite of not being vulnerable is over vulnerable. That's a really bad term. I'm going to work on that, folks. Sorry about that. Speaking of need to improve, right? I don't think so. I think I just made something up, but it's okay. Anyways, there is times like it could be too much. And part of it is you got to look at your audience.
Yeah.
Who are those that you would have this conversation with? And I think back to I was a part of a conference, without going into too much detail. I was a part of a conference, and part of the audience could be vulnerable with one another because of where they were in life, what they were doing. and another part of the audience could be vulnerable with each other. But the two should not have crossed. And unfortunately, there was a moment where we had to shut somebody down and say, hey, listen, the group that's over there does not need to hear all this. Like, there are some lessons in it and we can discuss them, but specifically what you have going on, you need to come over here and we're going to go have this talk. And it worked out. And I think that's the biggest thing as a leader, whether you need to go discern other people's actions, such as the case that I just gave everybody, or even in yourself. You know, is it appropriate to go to your coworkers and just unload everything you've got going on at home? Well, if it's someone who's a part of your tightest inner circle and they're that close of a friend, and you can do it not at the workplace unless it's just, hey, right here, right now, I need someone to talk to. Okay, find the balance in it. Easier said than done. I get it. But if you just go downstairs and go, listen, the reason why I'm mad at you guys is because of blah, 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 has nothing to do with the workspace. Your discernment's a little bit off and we need to talk.
That's a good example, Chris. Yeah.
You know, and I've seen it, you know, just, and it's, what's the old quote? Leave work at work and home at home. Let's be honest, not always possible, but pick and choose those moments. I mean, if you just find yourself boiling over, first of all, I've screwed this up more than once, but if you find yourself boiling over for whatever reason, whether it be sadness, whether it be anger, or maybe it is joy and excitement, but it's not time to do it yet, you scare the snot out of everybody, you got going, yeah, and you got someone on a machine and their hands are right where, you know, something could get crushed, probably not a good time to allow that to happen. But Jim, you as a connector, and you being somebody who brings different people together, you've got to have some different discernments of, okay, this group is going to be good for each other over here, and over here, this group's going to be good for each other. It's not like a segregation or creating bias, but just having that discernment of saying, you know what, there's some vulnerabilities that could exist here, but maybe this side's not ready for that. So how do we create some of these discernments? How do we find that balance?
You know, one thing I want to add to what you guys are saying, you know, there's usually you know, there has to be timing. Timing's really important in what you share, when the timing is. I would say also the context. What is the context of what you're trying to share? And then the relevancy, you know. And I think the timing, context, and relevancy is very clear. You know, I mean, there is a time and place to share what we should share. Can you be too vulnerable? Yes, if it's not the right time. You know what I mean? If somebody's having a great marriage and you want to share about the death of your spouse, probably not good timing, even though you could be vulnerable, right? You have to think about those sort of things. But in connecting different people, I think that, you know, this whole issue about vulnerability and looking at putting people together, you really do have to understand what people value. And I think those three things are very key when you're putting people together. There is a timing, you know, are they ready, you know, to hear what needs to be heard? Are they briefed in it? The context, do they, you know, is it the right space? Is it the right ambiance of what we are talking about? Does it flow with what's going on? And then relevancy, is it relevant to that person? You know, if I was gonna be with an employer, potentially new employer that doesn't know me, probably not the best thing to share about, you know, my parenting style or things that are going on in my marriage, right? And so you just have to keep things in those arenas, you know, put it in the context of who you're speaking with. And so, you know, Mike and I and you and I, you know, we talk about things offline. We can because we're closer. I may not share the same level of a fact to other people I don't know as well, you know, because there is, you know, again, a context to what we are talking about, and people don't have the context if they don't know who you are. All three of us have a relationship together, and you know, the whole thing is that we know each other, so there is usually a context to what we're sharing. Outside of that context, you know, people are going to imply certain things. They don't have the container of why you're sharing what you're sharing sometimes, you know. So, and they may not even care, to be honest, you know, depending on who they are. So hopefully that's helpful. But in these groups, you know, it is all about really, you know, I think discernment. You brought up that word, Chris, very key word for everything that we do, especially putting together people, you know, just being discerning as well.
And wow, that was an excellent description, by the way. I hope everybody's taking notes on that. I know I'm like, woo, glad this is recorded. You know, one of the things that I'd say in that is that discernment, which this is another word that's going to come up later on this year in leaders are discerners, is as a leader, you have the added responsibility. It doesn't have to be a liability. You have the added responsibility of thinking about the time, the content slash context, the audience. And there are times where either A, you're going to have to check yourself and go, this is probably not the time. Even though, yes, I'm boiling over, it's okay to just hold it and check for a little bit. You can do that. That's maturity at its finest. But there are also times where you may have to put other people in check, and that's easier said than done, especially if you do have a high emotional event and a high emotional moment and high emotional person. But sometimes you got to look over and go, hey, I got you. We're going to go over here and discuss this. We talked about not too long ago here on the show of just being honest with people and hearing about someone who's struggling and they're over there struggling on the line. They're not getting work done or anything else. No one knows what's going on because they're not willing to open up and be vulnerable. You come over as someone who has the respect and the vulnerability and authenticity of the people who you serve as their leader. And you come over and you say, hey, I heard some things are going on. Why don't you come to the office, open door, 3:00, let's chat. You remember I talked about handing them the card or the pamphlet because you found out that they've got something going on at home that maybe your employee services can help with. Things of that nature. But because you've been open and vulnerable with that person, they're willing to be that with you. And the next thing you know, they're getting the help they need. It solves the problem. And now they're back on the floor being the person they're designed to be and doing a great job. And that allows for so much more productivity, profitability, peace within, provision within for everybody, that we start to see a better, brighter world, which I think when you're a true leader, you're true to yourself and true to others, is absolutely going to happen. Mike, final thoughts from you, and how do we get a hold of you?
So you can get a hold of me at mike@truemanlifecoaching.com. You check out the podcast at truemanpodcast.com, and check out my book coming up on my authors page, which is MikeVanPeltAuthor.com. So my final comments are, I don't know that I can really add to anything that we've said. I think this is a very important topic, and I think a lot of people hide behind their feelings sometimes, maybe out of fear, maybe out of shame. Maybe they just don't know any better. This is not, generally speaking, something that's taught. It has to be learned. So, it's, but a very, very important subject. And it's a good attribute to have, to be vulnerable, because that's authenticity.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like it is one of those must-haves. Now, at what level? That's something you got to work on, something you got to learn.
Yeah.
Jim, how do we get a hold of you and your final thoughts?
Well, we can go for zoomturtle.com. Just go to zoomturtle.com, scroll down, you'll eventually find my contact information. But I think very apropos discussion before I kick off here. There's so much going on in the virtual space today, just the context of everything. I have another meeting I'll be jumping into. And so I just really love what you're providing here, Chris. And, I deal with high-end media, and also, of course, just really helping people maximize their opportunity in life, financially, career-wise, and just what they want to achieve, and helping them tell their story. So hope you guys have a great one, and I will catch you guys later, but I know you guys will be going on. Take care.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so that's the big thing, everybody, is really, this is something that is highly valued in leadership today. We're seeing it's bridging massive gaps to be vulnerable and honest with everyone, to be able to say, listen, this is where I'm at, this is where I need to be, this is where you are at, this is where we need to be, and having sometimes difficult conversations in it. But that vulnerability will build, and this is what we started with, it'll build that authenticity. And that's why last week we talked about authenticity first, is being able to have that. You gain so much more respect. So much more respect. For those of you looking to get in contact with me, my name is Chris Tice, eaglefireenrichment.com, or Chris at eaglefireenrichment.com. I love talking all things leadership as well as inspirational speaking. I do help teach on discernment, especially when it comes to vulnerability and reaching out to your teams and determining, where are those circles? and which ones do we utilize when? That's something I'm very passionate about because it's something that I think is very, very, very important, not just in leadership, but in all aspects of life. As always, I am grateful for my co-host, Jim Chi Chong, who had to hop off. Mike Van Pelt, thank you so much, sir. I truly value you and appreciate you. And we will look forward to seeing you all on True Leadership next week at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. As always, a blessing to be here. Go out, have your best day ever by making every day great, remembering that can't never did because it didn't do anything for anybody. God bless us all. Take care, everyone.
Take care.